Hi everyone, welcome back to the First Time Gardener series. This is actually the very last video in the series. We've had so much fun starting our seeds indoors. We've been hardening them off here for a couple of days. And on today's video, I'm going to show you how to transplant your little baby seedlings into larger containers so they can continue to grow to strong, healthy seedlings so you have a ton of veggies to harvest. Now, this process can at times be just a little bit tricky. Your plants can go into transplant shock, get stunted, and not do so well. So today I'm going to share with you how to do it in 4 easy steps so you're successful at it and you can grow a ton of veggies. So let's head down to the garden below and I'll show you how easy it is. Now, it's not always necessary to up-pot or transplant your indoor seedlings before you get them planted out in the garden. However, here in my situation in Southern California, my garden beds are still full of my cool weather veggies, so I'm going to transplant them while I wait for some space to open up. Or your case might be that it's just too cold outside to get these little veggies planted outside in your garden beds. So it's a good time to put them in a larger container to give them a little bit more room to breathe and grow. And then when the weather warms up, you can transfer them to your garden beds. The first tip for successfully transplanting your indoor seedlings into larger containers is that timing really is everything. If you leave them too long in their little 6-packs, they're going to outgrow, get stunted, and not do as well. However, on the other hand, if you transplant them too early, they're just too teeny tiny. They could go into transplant shock and die. But there are 2 clues that really take the guesswork out of it. The first thing you want to look at is the leaves. So in the case of this little pepper plant here, they have at least 2 sets of the true leaves, and the true leaves are the leaves that actually look like a pepper plant. They've got 1, 2, and they've got another one coming out the middle. So these little seedlings are about at the right size to transplant. They're about 2 to 3 inches tall, and they're going to do very well in a larger container. Now, the second thing you want to look for is the roots. So I'm going to pull out one of these little peat pellets here. This is a little KX kale from my brand new specialty green seed collection. And you can see here that at the bottom of the peat pellet, the roots are starting to come out, and that definitely needs transplanted into a larger size container so the roots can continue to grow and take up the water and the air and the nutrients so this can grow into a beautiful kale plant. The second tip for successfully transplanting your indoor seedlings is to transplant them into a new container that's about 25 to 40% larger. Or so, I mean, give or take a few. But the reason for that is the roots need room to breathe, the plant needs room to grow, and that way you're not continually transplanting and up-potting throughout the time that you had the seedlings indoors. So a couple ideas for you guys. A lot of you might have grown microgreens indoors in my Calicum 1-gallon smart pots. These work great for little transplant pots. They're breathable, they're durable, and it's going to give your plant plenty of room to grow. Another thing that Smart Pots has that I really liked, I've used these for years, and they last forever, are these little transplanter pots. These are 1 gallons, and the cool thing is they have little split sides so that when it comes time to plant them out in the garden, it's really easy to get your plant out of these things. You could also use nursery containers that you might have gotten in the past. You can recycle them, sour cream containers, something that's at least 25 to 40% larger. Now, one thing I really like to use is these 4-inch nursery pots. For smaller seedlings like the purple basil, it works really well. Whatever container you end up using, make sure that it has holes for drainage. The Smart Pots are aerated, so that's not a problem with them. That way your plants don't get root rot and they continue to take up the water, the air, the nutrients, and they'll do really well. So I'm going to go ahead and get my little tomato plants planted up here in my 1-gallon Calicum Smart Pots. And I like to fill the container with brand new mix. This is actually some of my seed starting mix that I had left over from starting seeds. But you can use an organic potting mix at this point if you'd like to. But you do want to put some nice fresh new mix in there so that your plants have the nutrients that they need to really get off to a good start when you're transplanting. So here I've got my Aunt Ruby's German green tomato from my tomato seed collection. This is one of my all-time favorite tomatoes. It's so delicious, oh my gosh, and it's just the most beautiful tomato you've ever seen. Now, little clue when you're transplanting tomatoes. Number 1, you can pull the seedlings apart and have 2 different seedlings here from 1 seed cell. So these roots look absolutely amazing, but I'm just going to very gently pull them apart. Let's set the second one aside here. And what you want to do with tomato seedlings is plant them deep in the container, because wherever the stem touches the soil, see these teeny tiny little hairs here, it's going to send out roots. It's going to be a much stronger plant because of it. So I'm going to plant them deep in my little 1-gallon smart pots. So this one needs just a little bit more soil here. My soil is pre-moistened, so my little seedling has the moisture that it needs to really get off to a good start here. I'm going to fill this all the way up to the top with potting mix or with seed starting mix. Just leave the top 2 leaves sticking out. Then as my tomato plant grows, it's going to grow lateral roots. It'll be a nice sturdy plant. And don't forget to label it and date the back so you know exactly what tomato you're growing. Don't these pepper plants look beautiful? These are the California Wonders from the Spring Garden Seed Collection. Little tip with getting your seedlings out of the 6-pack. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. So what I like to do is squeeze the bottom of the cell just to kind of loosen it up a little bit. And then I just take a regular old spoon from my kitchen and I just kind of lift it out very gently. And voila. There you go. Now here we actually have 4 different seedlings. You can also separate pepper seedlings and plant them in separate containers. Not all plants work like that. Some don't like to have their roots disturbed, like cucumbers, melons, and squash. So with those, I usually thin them and clip them out at the base. But for now, I'm just going to let this whole bunch of peppers grow in the same little pot here. This I'm going to do in the Smart Pots transplanter. Now with peppers, you don't need to bury the stems like you do with tomatoes. So I'm just going to dig a little hole here in my transplanter, pop my little pepper seedling in here, and then what I'm going to do is backfill it right to soil level so the top of the soil is even with the top of the soil from the pepper seedling. Now let me just show you how I transplant here in this little 4-inch nursery pot. Dump a little bit of the soil out. Just dig a hole in the middle of the pot. Give my little seed cell a squeeze again. Use my spoon here to get the seedling out. Pop it right in my little 4-inch cup. Might need to backfill just a little bit here. And we're good to go. Tip number 3 for successfully transplanting your indoor seedlings. If you're doing it outside, make sure you do it on a cloudy day or in the shade. When you're transplanting seedlings, they're very susceptible to something called transplant shock. They might wilt and kind of keel over. That is perfectly normal, but you can minimize this by doing it in the shade or transplanting them on a cloudy day, or by doing it inside to minimize that transplant shock. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of these seedlings up potted, and we'll come back and talk about tip number 4. Now this basil plant is looking just a little bit leggy because they were planted very close together. So one thing that you can do with leggy seedlings is when you transplant them, plant them deeper into the pot so that the soil supports the leggy stems. And I added some soil for a little bit of extra support. Now one little tip for smart pots, fold the sides down, works well for smaller seedlings. That way you don't have to use as much soil. In the case of my tiny Tims here, the perfect size. I love these little tomatoes. These are from my container garden seed collection. They are the most delicious container tomato, super, super productive. And what I'm going to do with these is I'm actually going to plant 3 little seedlings in my little smart pots. It saves me space. And then I could just transplant them into a 5-gallon container once they outgrow my little 1-gallon here. Then as they grow, I can just fold the sides of the pot up and add more soil so they develop some really nice good roots along these stems. And when you're transplanting peat pellets, you always want to pull the netting off because it really does tend to restrict the roots. This is gonna be tasty. Step 4 for successfully transplanting your indoor seedlings is to water and feed them when you're transplanting them. And the reason for that is they can easily grow into transplant shock, and if they have adequate moisture and feeding right when you transplant them, it really minimizes this. So I've grabbed my hose link retractable hose. This thing is so handy, I love it. I'm going to add some water to the seedling tray. I put my little 1-gallon smart pots in a little storage tub. It's a great way to water. It's an easy way to transport them if you're still hardening them off and going inside and outside. And when you're watering your transplants, you always want to water from the bottom. I'm going to add several inches of water, and I love feeding them with the Vitality, the same thing I feed them when they're little seedlings, because this really does help with root development, and it really helps your plants avoid the transplant shock. So I'm going to add 1 shot of Vitality. And then I'm definitely going to add a higher nitrogen fertilizer. This is the Good Dirt plant food. Same thing we added when they were little baby seedlings. And I'm going to still add it at about half strength, a couple of capfuls here. Then as they soak up the water from the bottom, the same thing, the top of the soil will turn a darker brown color. Then you can dump off the excess water. You really see your plants take off at this point with the feeding. They'll have more room to breathe, more room to grow, and before you know it, it's going to be time to get them planted outside. Now don't be alarmed if your transplants are looking just a little bit wilted like my basil ones are here. Usually after feeding them and with a little bit of sunshine, they perk right up within a couple of days. Little word of caution though, you want to baby your transplants for a couple of days. If you're done with the hardening off process and they're outside, you might want to put them under a piece of shade cloth or in the shade for a couple of days until they perk up. If you're growing them indoors, just continue to keep them under your grow lights. And then if you haven't yet started the hardening off process and it's warm enough outside, you want to do that. So go back and watch the previous video for all the information. Now, if you missed any of the videos in the First Time Gardener series, first of all, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next series, which is on raised bed gardening. But go back and watch the First Time Gardener series from the beginning so you know exactly how to get your spring garden started. And everything we covered in today's video is in chapter 4 of my book, Organic Gardening for Everyone. So you have everything written down for you too. And I am still having my BOGO sale until Monday, March 14th. And that is, you buy 1 seed collection, you get 1 seed collection of equal or lesser value at 50% off. So it's a really good deal. And use the code CaliKimThinkSpring for that. All right, guys, let me know where you're at in your spring garden process, if you've already started your seeds, or if you're going to be starting them indoors very soon. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video.